Remember anything about this appeal, remember that exclusion is the enemy of the planning process, and you have excluded many. Affordable housing supply in context. Chelmsford City Council is in the top 20% of best performing English authorities for housing supply and the best in Essex. The appellants are arguably one of the most historically prolific house builders in the Chelmsford Borough, with an enviable track record in associated land banks. Housing crisis is national, but with local manifestations almost everywhere across the country. The identified critical need in this locality is for affordable rented property. I'm not going to read out the core document references, sure. As set out in the March 22 Chelmsford Housing Strategy Report. The appeal proposal provides just 24 such homes out of a total of 55. Custodians say that the remaining 31 shared ownership units, while still an affordable housing product, attract less weighting and planning balance, as they are not targeted at the most critical need. There is no proof that this is an optimum scheme. The appellants have declined the LPA's advice to provide a financial appraisal, but for a scheme purporting to do all it can to meet critical need, it has, by virtue of site location and high sensitivity, attracted massive infrastructure and build costs, which are disproportionately high for such a meagre contribution to the critical need. A genuinely led planning system provides a platform for local people to shape their surroundings, whereas an exception scheme in a situation where the appeal site has been consciously not allocated for development, but rather protected for its high environmental qualities, excludes local people from the place shaping process. Had they been involved in the pre-proposal scoping and design process, we could have brought healthy tension into the considerations and helped to avoid the pitfalls manifestly present in the current appeal, which manifests compromise upon compromise. Country Park. The LPA made a conscious decision not to allocate the gift land as Country Park, either in the company adopted local plan or the emerging local plan. This can be distinguished from the Manor Farm Country Park, which is a strategic allocation. The gift land is rather identified as open space within the Green Wedge, for which the LPA has some environmental enhancement aspirations. The recreation aspirations are primarily focused on increased use of the river and walking cycling, for which the many footpaths are already recognised. In evidence, Mr Dixon cites paragraph 529 of the local plan, which refers to the gift land as historically forming part of the original master plan for Chandler Village. He does not produce the original master plan, nor explain why the appellants, as original developers, did not provide the original country park. There is an inherent injustice in the appellants failing to provide the original country park, then unashamedly coming back over 40 years later and asking for more housing on the back of it. The local plan was found sound and adopted, hence by definition has been prepared positively in a way that is aspirational but deliverable. In cross-examination, Mr Dixon accepted this. This would apply to the gift land allocations without any assistance from the appellant. Similarly, in cross-examination, Mr Forde was asked whether there was any other opportunity for the LPA to deliver the gift land. Mr Forde said that the local plan was deliverable by definition. He was impressed on Mr Forde that there was no proof that any mechanism existed, and that the appeal scheme was the only hope to deliver the gift land to meet the LPA's strategic objectives for it. Yet Mr Dixon refers to the Chelmsford Policy Board report of 14th of July 2022 and Appendix A. This is a certain reference to the working group on Chelmsford's waterways with the stated purpose of to look at how to improve and encourage the varied use of the city's waterways and their adjacent paths and open spaces, to identify ways of involving the wider river and waterway user community to implement any agreed ideas with appropriate monitoring and measuring progress over time. Appendix B details a plan for improving the waterways, rivers and waterways in and around Chelmsford. The measures for improvement planning are in paragraph 15 to 20, including a 10-year investment programme in the region of 13 to 15 million. This is the appellant's own reference document. In cross-examination, Mr Dixon was taken through a number of summary references, concluding with key elements of an improvement plan in Appendix B of the Policy Board Plan, where Roman 14 cited targeted land acquisitions to extend publicly accessible green space along river corridors set out in the Chelmsford Green Infrastructure Plan. May also include consolidation of land holdings to secure changes in management practices to protect and enhance wildlife habitats and encourage biodiversity. Allowance of say 2 million over the 10-year programme. The simple point is that 1, the local plan is implicitly deliverable, 2, the council has an improvement plan which dovetails with the strategic objectives of the gift land and the wider river valley. This answers the appellant's allegation that there are no other options. In re-examination, the appellants capriciously and opportunistically changed tack. Now, instead of claiming that there were no available options for the deliverability of the transfer land, Mr Dixon was led through parts of the policy board report to now claim that the Chelmsford Policy Board Improvement Plan could in fact be read as the appellant's delivery scheme through the appeal. Can you see what's happening here? The appellant has been caught out by the fact that the council is working steadfastly to an improvement plan that does not rely on the appeal scheme and never needed to. There was a last-ditch attempt to salvage the argument. The appellant changed their argument and superimposed themselves like a cuckoo in the nest as if to take the place of the LPA in the delivery process. This approach has no integrity and exposes the frailty of the appellant's deliverability argument, which changes with the wind. The LPA does not need the gift land to deliver their strategic priorities, and the appellant's suggestion that it does carries no weight. Rules for Section 106 contributions and the gift land. It's important to remember the development to be permitted is 55 dwellings. Local plans should set out the contributions expected from development. The development satisfies the expected contribution without the gift land. Planning obligation must only be sought when they meet 3 tests. Number 1, the gift land is not necessary to make the development acceptable. It complies with the expected contributions in its own right. Number 2, there is no direct relationship between the development to be permitted and the gift land. The only connection is ownership, which is more of a convenience than a relationship in planning terms. The strategic priorities of the LPA in relation to enhanced public open space are a completely separate matter, unconnected to the development to be permitted. Number 3, the gift land is not fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development. There is no actual scale and kind parameter to be applied as the gift land is not necessary. However, in any estimation, the gift 29 hectares of land is massively disproportionate to the appeal proposal, which occupies just 1.67 hectares and comprises just 55 units. It is unusual that the developer would offer something that is not required for the development to be permitted, but in doing so, the offer takes it outside the rules. Custodians say the offer was nothing more than an inducement to grant planning permission. The rules are there to guard against such possibilities and to prevent LPAs for asking for more than is necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. There is some indication in the application processes, as well as the private highway processes that took place, the LPA were by degree softening their approach to the issues and showing favour to the appellants on the issues and also on the process. This is to the detriment of public perception and the integrity of the planning system generally. Such is the danger of unnecessary gifts, and that is what the rules were in place to protect against. On this basis, the gift land has no heritage. It's common ground that the appeal proposal will cause less than substantial harm to heritage assets. The appellants say a lower order of less than substantial harm, but they have a recorded history of deliberately underestimating significance of harm which has never been corrected. The original built heritage assessment, which remains part of the bottom of the original application documents, overlooked the Prentice's Farm, a Grade 2 listed building which is within the 500 metre parameter set by the assessment author and heritage expert Jennifer Cook. On this basis, in total 6 listed buildings ought to be considered, not 5. I know that it was considered within the appeal. The built heritage assessment, along with the design and access statement and planning statement, gave undue weight to the former construction compound, which has largely returned to a natural landscape, but for which restoration conditions remain extant in any case. The conclusion of the original BHA was that the proposed development will have no impact on the significance of the conservation area or the built heritage assets. This was signed off by the appellant's original expert team. It is so far outside of reasonable mainstream assessment that no reliability can be placed upon it. It also goes to integrity. The appeal site as it stands today is entirely consistent with the conservation area character appraisal. For example, the urban area rising over the hill is broken by widespread tree planting, which softens the urban form and aids the visual integration into its rural setting. Similarly, Barnes Farm is a prominent feature within the landscape and provides a strong focal point. The open setting with a tree enclosure provides an important setting to historic buildings. The Chelmsford Borough Historic Characterisation Project concurs. The valley is largely occupied by scattered farmsteads, Prentice's Farm, Farms Farm, for example. Some of the field boundaries are likely to be of great antiquity. Areas of traditional pasture is defined by clear boundaries. Remains of these boundaries often survive, offering the possibility of easy restoration. There are small areas of ancient woodland on the valley sides. The trees on the sides are not ancient, but strongly emulate historic land. The southern boundary is as it was on the 1840s side map. No one disputes that Chelmer Road and Chelmer Valley Way together form an appropriate boundary to the conservation area, that there is deliberate roadside planting on both sides to bring visitors. The setting of Barnes Farm, the original manor, being the original manor, and its farm buildings, has been systematically reduced and compromised, principally by the creation of Chelmer Valley Village and its road system. The appeal site is therefore a precious remnant of the original setting in the immediate foreground of the principal elevation of Barnes Farm, towards which all of its large principal windows were designed to face. The appeal site referred to as the lay, chase or pasture in Pennage JF6. The appellants take a counterintuitive position, saying that the appeal site is so compromised that the appeal site only makes a minor contribution to the significance of the asset, but they also crane the larger part of the water meadow to the south, over which they say the building has clear views. The reality is Barnes Farm has only secondary side windows facing south of the ground floor and one small first floor window. This is no compensation for the loss of the principal view. The importance of land forming part of a historic setting should be regarded more highly, where it is the last remnant of a diminished asset, rather than to be regarded as being more or less significant. The appellant's position on this is the opposite of how the appeal site should be regarded in relation to setting. They take the same approach when it comes to Green Wedge. Mr. Stoughton, in common with Andrew Williams on Green Wedge, considers the interior of the site as little experienced from the wider vicinity. Photographs 1, 36 and 42 of JRF2 suggest otherwise, and indeed photograph 1 provides a view from the side frontage to the site and out to the water meadow on the other side. The reverse view is also possible. These views will become more open to the winter seasons after leafball. Mr. Stoughton makes no submissions about the raising of land levels, effectively creating a step in the land, or the creation of an engineered bunk with a foundation and engineered core. Alex Bennett described this in cross-examination. This is a serious omission, mentioning only the modest historic interest of the southern headroom. It's also contrary to the advice of the LPA's planning officer in application discussion, which advised how the levels are altered and the visual implications will need to be carefully considered, particularly given the site's location and the surrounding sensitivities. Overall, disregard for the historic southern boundary and its obliteration to engineered landform change logically leads to a need to adjust the appellant's conclusions upwards into proportionally higher realms of harm. Custodians have counted their heritage evidence within a holistic view of the water meadow and its multifacets. They observe that it is the water meadow that provides the raison d'etre for the historic buildings and the structures within it. Barnes Farm, Prentice's Farm, Barnes Mill and Mill House. Barnes Farm all have a direct and organic relationship with the water meadow. And the historic existence of these buildings is derived from that organic relationship arising from the existence and use of the water meadow. This is experienced in changing perspective when moving around the water meadow. The character and setting of the historic buildings and their relationship to one another is influenced little by the city nearby, but retains a strong and enduring rural aesthetic. The custodians acknowledge this group value and its significance to setting in the roundtable discussion. In contrast, the LPA and appellant rather underestimated this holistic relationship, both in terms of significance and sensitivity to change. They barely mention it. Custodians take an informed, wider view on setting, having regard to Good Practice Advice 3, the setting of heritage assets, which states, while setting is largely a visual term, with use considered to be an important consideration in any assessment of the contribution the setting makes to the significance of an asset, and thus the way in which an asset is experienced. Setting also encompasses other environmental factors, including noise, vibration and odour. Historical and cultural associations may also form part of the asset setting, which can inform or enhance the significance of a heritage asset. The appeal site is identified as a chase in the 1840 type return, holds greater rural heritage value than the LPN appellants give credit for. The three-storey 55 dwelling proposal would fragment this landscape and impose itself into the foreground of Barnes Farm principal elevation. To as well as having a wider harmful visual influence on the identified heritage assets, most notably the setting of barns, farm and farm buildings and the character of the conservation area. Custodians say that the level of harm is at higher or of less than substantial harm, and note that there are no heritage benefits or restorative proposals within the appeal scheme. When weighed against the public benefits, such harm is not outweighed by such benefits. This provides a strong reason for refusing planning permission, and on that basis, the tilted balance is not engaged. I acknowledge Mr. Young's correction on that in my cross-examination. This accords with reason for refusal 2. Development policies are strategic policy S3 and policy DM13, both of which require great weight to be placed upon the preservation or enhancement of designated heritage assets and their setting. This accords with the advice of Historic England, who objected to the appeal proposal on the 1st of August 2023 and reiterated their objection on the 26th of November 2024 when we consulted on revisions. Was Stoughton claimed that Historic England do not object, that this is their way of saying to the decision maker, you decide on the facts, or worse to that effect. The Stoughton was not able to point to any guidance or explanatory texts to that effect, and hence her opinion on this matter is not evident and remains anecdotal. In contrast, the custodian stated that a plain imagery of the historic responses is as explicit objections. Trees, woodland and landscape features, local plan policy DM17 refers this matter is covered by reason for refusal 3. Custodians approach this matter holistically with the trees, hedgerows, shrubby trees and landscape features being component parts of our historic landscape, fully describing evidence and the various formal assessment documents, some mentioned in the preceding heritage section. The site is acknowledged by all parties to be highly visible and adjacent to a highway where circa 8,400 vehicles pass every day in both directions. That is in addition to those who enjoy leisure and recreation in the water meadow, so highly visible by many. At the roundtable discussion, it was agreed that the framework of trees is not ancient and comprise groups rather than woodland by definition. Hedgerow is not of the same date as the 19th century boundary defines. Individually, the trees are not of high value, but the landscape structure of the site as a whole has great integrity. Save for routine maintenance of individual trees, there is nothing wrong with it. In the landscape, it defines and emphasises the northern edge of the conservation area and the historic southern boundary of the appeal site, thereby characterising and embracing the open meadow upon which barns farm has its purview. It hails the transition from working water meadow to pasture. At the round table, it was observed that the proposal replaces no trees on the northern boundary, but rather a hard edge of new buildings with no tree space. It is not possible to retain the trees and establish landscape structure and provide the development. It is rather a situation of all change. The landscape strategy does not reinstate the historic character, that is not possible. It rather replaces what is established to create a space large enough for development. It raises land to push back the flood and engineers a bund, not strictly aligned with the historic southern boundary, with uncharacteristic landform and an additional unprecedented north-south extension to the bund at the western end. Almost all the historic landscape structure is erased. The resultant development does not organically relate to the water meadow, unlike the historic buildings, but rather it turns away from it and visually associates with the urban area to the north and creates physical barriers to the south. In landscape terms, the open setting with a tree enclosure, which provides an important setting, will be lost. The mitigation measured by a net gain in trees maturing in 15 years will not compensate for what is lost. What is to be provided has no historic provenance, and the replacement environment will be poorer than what is there now. The appellant seeks to measure the added value in monetary terms. The custodians ascribe different environmental values. The average lifespan of the barn owl that hunts over the appeal site, or the kestrel that does the same, is for both about 4 to 5 years. At least 3 generations of these apex predators will lose this part of their hunting ground in the time it takes the prosaic landscape replacement to mature. The custodians consider that there are no overriding public benefits arising from the development that justify the removal of the existing trees and harm to existing landscape features. Reason for refusal 3 should be upheld. And design matters including visitor parking. This topic is a subject of reason for refusal 4. local plan policies DM24 and DM27 refer. For economy of time, bearing in mind the extremely short lead into the appeal, the fine points of the design objection were left to the LPA. The custodian will support them in that. The custodians have provided evidence relating to the consequences of a shortfall in visitor parking, which in part also dovetails with the highway objections raised by the custodians in the next section. It is notable that 6 years after first embarking on the path leading to this appeal, the appellants appear to have spent more time on design than on any other, even at the expense of more fundamental matters. The design and access statement is a testament to neglecting the fundamentals and concentrating on design detail, and what the custodians called greenwashing in their first objection letter, 24th of October 2023. Am I doing the time?
You're okay.
The appellants chose the site. Its location on the outside of the dual carriageway, a site that tapers to the west, that has 1 foot in the water and needs flood protection, that requires a higher than normal quality befitting a conservation area close to listed buildings in a highly visible position on the valley edge. The design challenge is immense, but the appellants brought it on themselves. The appellant neglected LPA pre-application advice to reduce density and stay out of flood zone 3. That is a key reason why symptoms of overdevelopment persist, and why the appellant relies upon further compromise in the design in order to achieve the success they desire. There may also be viability issues that are forcing the need for higher unit numbers, arising from the extraordinary cost of development in this difficult context. The custodians have set out the practical dilemma a visiting driver is faced with if unable to find a parking space. Returning to the carousel, made more complex and congested further by complicated highway design, looping round and around without opportunity to legitimately park or to club to the internal courtyard by ad hoc parking. Iterative design at lower density is better than suboptimal design at harmful density, the latter of which is what has been provided here. The appeal proposal does not comply with local plan policy DM24 and DM26. Reason for refusal 4 should be upheld. Highways. The appellant's route to secure and support of the local highway authority is extraordinary. It is characterised by privacy and politics, canvassing related officials, which included the Deputy Leader in charge of the City Council, was also a councillor for the local highway authority, notably not a Cheltenham Village Board member, now a member of Parliament. Made possible by the extraordinary and unprecedented generosity of the AGA in the application process. One might wonder why an authority that needs application deadlines as good as any authority in this country will exceptionally carve out a 17-month space within the application timetable. That means to secretly do their work. They can only speculate and consider what was in the LPA. The contrast of those outrageous freedoms was the suppression of information to third parties could not be further apart in terms of access to the planning process. Custodians knew nothing. The LPA website was silent. The case officer, unnamed to us still to this present day, did not return one phone call. The LHA declined to provide any correspondence or relevant information for the 17-month period, claiming that the FOI request would be manifestly unreasonable due to the sheer volume of correspondence and plans. The imminence of the appeal timetable prevented any more focused request for information within the time available. Custodians say it is manifestly unreasonable to conduct the highway design process within the application timetable without any wider, more open but consultative process for information exchange taking place. Partial story is very available from the LPA's point of part in that process. Option 9 is the best design out of a long series of failures. It still contains compromises or else does not fulfill the expected consultation and or studies. The round table mark again is confirmed that whilst there was differing advice on these LTM 120s, the most recent proposed to crossing does not comply with advice, which he said marked a fundamental change to the approach. The LHA gave no explanation why they accepted it, or said it would appear to be the most appropriate crossing option. The answers are hidden without evidence. There was no engagement where LTM requires that early engagement with relevant interested parties should be undertaken, including those representing disabled people and pedestrians and cyclists generally. Failure to engage is not abrogated duty to ensure that the design of infrastructure is accessible to all. The unspoken support of the LHA does not overcome this. This design was pursued in full measures from the outset of two crossing satisfying and up-to-date design is incapable of being provided basis for this act, so discretion is with the LHA and their councillors. In evidence, Mr. Forde explained in detail the various complexities of the highway alterations that are deemed necessary for the occupiers of 55 dwellings to satisfy regional highway standards, despite proposing a substandard tube crossing and amongst other things, about 1/6 of the capacity of the westbound carriageway. The appellant refused to assess the capacity of the highway in this new complex configuration, despite the LHA requesting such information. It follows that the LHA assessed the impact of on highway capacity without any modelling or empirical data. This is yet another anecdotal supposed technical design turned only by officer stroke member discretion and hidden without explanation for public scrutiny. Highway solution is complex, as in places avoiding proper assessment, healthy consultation and accountable scrutiny. It contains compromises that are unexplained or contrary to the latest advice should at least be subject to a precautionary approach. Custodians accept that there are some things they cannot prove. Information is withheld, but to the extent that the scheme can be assessed as a matter of fact suboptimal. The provision of just 55 new dwellings has cost implications to the developer against which they bought, and the indication that on the local highway network, uncertain as some of them are, taking both together seems a high price to pay. On reflection and bearing in mind two things: firstly, no objections to the LHA, and secondly, paragraph 116 of the framework compromises absence of stakeholder consultation has failed to assess highway capacity, configuration and overall complexity for a small housing gain. It is still likely that the residual cumulative impact on the road network would be potentially significant, so less than severe. On this basis, these matters would not constitute a rule of revision in their own right, but they would have weighed against the proposal in plan balance as other matters. This is the custodian's reasoned addition which they have reached from the limited information available and having regard to the obstructive and limited access to the planning process they've been afforded at key times. Sequential test. The LPR requires to determine the appropriate area of search. 4 years of pre-application discussion. The LPA confirmed they took no part in the appropriate area of search. The LPA produced no guidance on the appropriate area of search. They have been passive throughout, perhaps influenced by the gift. In 4 years of pre-application discussion, the appellant did not press the LPA to determine the appropriate search area to avoid other work being undertaken unnecessarily or required to increase certainty to developers. At the same time, the appellant proceeded with their self-appointed search area, knowingly of risk. The appellants accept that based upon a strategic crisis in affordable housing, the search area was at its greatest extent in the entire area of the local planning authority. The appellant submit just 3 bullet points to justify a narrow geographical area. Bullet 1, chief aspiration and public open space. We say this to connect development to be permitted. Bullet 2, long-standing objectives reinforce strategic preparation set out in an historic master plan. This is unconnected development to be permitted, and if critical of the appellant has failed to deliver the original master plan. Bullet 3, find it is only possible to stroke problem that's currently within the Green Wedge. This is again unconnected development and logically untrue in any case. Paragraph 8.22 of Mr. Forde's proof. The alleged justification is unconnected to the development committee, so the superficial relies only on the gift fund. The sequential test fails right there. The sequential test is further contrived and insists that land sufficient to accommodate 1.67 hectares development and 29 hectares gift land they found in the same place contiguously. This is a false association. They do not need to be together. But by requiring it, it doesn't cynically exclude every piece of land within an already tightly defined and heavily constrained flood meadow. Then it provided no additional evidence to support a sequential test when questioned about the LPA's passivity in the application process. He merely asserted that the LPA was satisfied after the event, which was not questioned, and he would not move from that position. The sequential test lacks integrity and should not be permitted if there are reasonably available sites appropriate for the proposed development, not to give man areas with a low risk of flooding. To singularly fails to demonstrate it. Poorly specified sequential tests of places the appeal proposal to treat conflicts with treating policy S1, spatial principles, and S2, assessing climate change and progress. And this is an insert. As a result of this custodian's cost application, I drew my attention to Fenton. I think the best I can do here in response is to refer to the Town Planning Association briefing note which circulated, entitled Recent Planning Field and the Sequential Test. It refers to these cases and others, giving a rounded summary of the issues and how this relates to the application of national policy for flood risk. Advice to decision makers going forward. I submit this as a tentative consideration for the stated cases. One specific point I would make is that if because custodians are right that the sequential statement taken was inappropriate specified service parameters, then it is highly likely that there are many sequentially preferable sites of occurrence in and around the city boundaries. Flooding hydrology and reliability. Mr. Parker produced extensive evidence reminding inquiry about the EA's own caveat, cautioning against reliance on their data, which comes without any degree of accuracy. The uncertainty of model calibration and sensitivity testing, and the importance of communicating and understanding of the uncertainty in model outputs. I think further emphasising this to consult all sources of historic data, including water levels, post reports, He demonstrated that flow monitoring in the relative water courses is flawed and being commenced by stream of the city overflowing in high water conditions. Water bypassing the meter and providing a suspect reading. He verified the EA's definition of suspect as requested in cross-examination in an email dated 23rd of October. Russia's water hydrometric station downstream is no longer operational, so no measurements of runoff in the city can be made by combining a reliable upstream flow with what is measured downstream. Appellants rely on the DDA estimates. The party demonstrated that runoff is dramatically increasing in large volumes at the city floodgates and at increased frequency year-on-year. This all without an increase in average rainfall over the same period. Though weather patterns are more extreme, he logically attributed the increased runoff to uncertainty within the city. He observed that recent development of the Forde Peninsula since 2019 is in flood zone 3 and has no capacity for subs. He observed that proposed development beyond a strategic junction are within flood zone 3, so there's new hard services and no capacity for subs. Based on moderate high water event, he mapped out at flood level of 26.3 metres for the event on the 15th of January 2011. He showed some photographs of the same flooding occurred 4 times in 6 years. There was an probability of 66% in any 1 year. In contrast, the appellant's model estimates provided a baseline with 1% annual exceedance probability plus climate change, i.e. at a 100-year level that is substantially the same as Mr. Parker's, which has proven the probability of 66%. The real world situation is rather more prevalent than the model suggests. Mr. demonstrated that the proper effects of the A12 bypass of Sanford Mill, which called water back up to be held up in the floodplain containing the appeal sites, increased volume and frequency of water, increasingly saturated for all parts of the year. He demonstrated that the surface detention basin located in flood zone 3 will be deeper than water in a flood event is capable of receiving surface water from the development. Mr. Bennett, in contrast, spoke doggedly to the model. He had no knowledge of the monitoring conditions on the ground and had not personally interrogated any significant high water events. Many of the historic data sources acknowledged that the model data was of a high level rather than a local floodplain, and estimated rather than a local floodplain and empirical. You're not able to explain the similarity between the estimated 1% flood event level and those not observed more frequently in practice in moderate events. And Mr. Parker was chastised in cross-examination for having no response from the AA about his concern about the modelling accuracy, despite only having 3 months to prepare for the inquiry. The response was received after the journal forwarded into a complaint. It confirmed the frailties of the monitoring stations and each precaution in hydrometric analysis. The EDA's model is therefore constructed on the basis of inaccurate data. Mr. Barker's independent analysis acknowledged and takes into account those data gathering weaknesses. Mr. Parker explained the critical vulnerability of downstream properties at Sandford Mill Cottage and Brookgate Cottages, explaining how flood defences raised after the last inundation were in the passage of time already coming close to inundation in moderate high water conditions. Mrs. Walden is the same for Barnes Mill, explaining how the last 3 days in 2016 allowed for an increased height of water level came within 1 centimetre of inundation at the top of the increased wall. That's along the hill, I can see that at the side of it. And Mrs. Walden demonstrated 26 years of creditable and personally expensive hard work to keep Barnes Mill effective in managing the increasingly difficult water flow conditions in the water meadow. She endorsed the Department's technically right conclusions about water volumes and frequency, the increased speed at which the floodplain fills, the increased ground saturation through the calendar year, now take longer to leave the floodplain, especially around the cul-de-sac beside the field site. Mrs. Warren was categorically denied paying funds to take Barnes Mill by posse of foundation representatives who turned them together to enforce the point. Mrs. Warren is aware that there are no funds to protect any of the 5 listed buildings which are of national importance yet situated in the water meadow. Mrs. Walnut is the Department of realistically fear the next 3-day event, the last being 2016, the water development having been built since 2019 onwards. Mrs. Walnut had taken part from the 2009 flood irrigation project, which would have reduced peak water by 5 centimetres on the millrace for irrigation. The scheme was cancelled in 2019, but there were no replacement plans. Mrs. Walnut mentioned Barnes provided at Chandler Village. If any commented on these as being commonplace, but they're an indicator of retrofitting flood defences after housing development has been found to flood after construction. The symptom was one explicit. Mr. Parker was about compromising flood zones in the manner that the field proposal suggests. Cross-examination, Mr. Bennett was not cognizant of the vulnerability of properties floodplain and floodplain, was unapologetic about the ethics of consultation in that regard. He maintained that the model said not to develop but not to increase flood risk elsewhere. He was not accepting Mr. Parker's 66 probability of reaching 22.2 metres on known high water events. When pressed, Bennett reluctantly accepted that an increase in height of water at the bone wall would increase in the greater spread of water in the floodplain. He was similarly reluctant to accept that the pushing back of water by the bond would encourage circumstances, if be allowed onto the appeal side, would actually increase the volume of water held in the floodplain. On Mr. Bennett's case alone, the pushback by the bond is not zero. This would categorically increase flood elsewhere, where there are recognised flood risk vulnerabilities that are increasingly critical. Mr. unilaterally redesigned the such drainage system. He did not tell anyone, he did not consult the EA or LFA his redesign, whether they would accept it, we just do not know. Implicit in his redesign decision is an acceptance that the submitted system relying on discharge of the flood zone 3 does not work in a flood event, although Mr. Bennett denied that also. Under cross-examination, Mr. Bennett tried to suggest that in a flood event water public development tends to be in its retention basin at a different time to the wider flood water. This is logically hydrologically incorrect and also denies pre-existing ground saturation. Displacement of water already in the floodplain by subwater discharge into an inundated detention basin would increase flood risk elsewhere. 2 into 1 does not go. In chief, Mr. Bennett, through Mr. Young, suggests that cutting a hole in the 8-hole embankment and cutting out a new channel at Sandwich might provide a strategic flood relief that throttle these obstructions caused. No evidence was provided to support this proposition. Neither was the timetable discussed in relation to the current appeal. No was any indication given about how likely such a strategic measure might take to come to fruition and by what means. If the 2009 scheme cancelled in 2019 then to go by such an ideal thing to be decades along in delivering. There are material differences in the real-life scientific observations of the custodians and the development model, theoretical model. These differences are significant when it comes to real-life high water, but not catastrophic. If actual flooding is more extreme and frequent than model, and the probability of catastrophic events is relatively unknown since 2016. This is coupled with an increase in flood water by virtue of pushback in the favour of the development to consider vulnerability of such schemes operational environment in a high water event. They offer no explanation of why they accepted it. The bill proposal would not minimise impact on flooding, and notwithstanding a submitted exception to test, it has not been demonstrated. Stone legislation the site is safe from all types of flooding, that it does not worsen flood risk elsewhere. Both is contrary to strategic policies S2 and policy DM18. Green Wedge. Custodians stand with the LPA on the matter of Green Wedge and said do not seek to replicate their work in the inquiry and dealing with the appellant's witnesses and believe that Dr. Dixon proof sets out. And this of course proof sets out the custodian's case in section 9 of the sale, which was relatively unassailed, which I do not repeat unnecessarily due to comparative appeal case related to what posed for 3 houses in the bottom of a formal gravel pit at Lowingdale site in the Channel Island, Greenwich site in the Channel Island. It was tree line at the upper level, bordered by housing on 2 sides and visually distinct from the more open river valley. The other 2 sides, this drew out key points about the relation between openness and intrinsic character. The small side are limited in aspect where a wider landscape can portray openness within itself, and it emphasises the multifaceted distinctive landscape as a result of all its constituent parts. Although the first appeal part was quashed, the reasons for quashing did not affect the reasoning I have identified within the language. The reheard appeal as a coffee. The loss of openness was considered harmful on account of an concern. There was a failure to take account of the different roles and character of different areas within the group. Hence the proposal was considered not environmental. The active policy in that case was DC9, parallel forerunner of the current DM7 principles that were relevant in relation to the Greenwich applied fairly and reasonably to the current cross-examination. Mr. Williams accepted that the Greenwich has a multifaceted distinctive landscape, that is many facets to one overall landscape, except that openness is part of the character of the Greenwich. Paradoxically, he opined that the openness of the river valley, that is, the appeal site, was somehow different to the openness of the appeal site itself, he would not accept that there were anything other than glimpses into and out of the appeal site, despite we showed photographs to the contrary. I list those photographs there. Mr. Williams confirmed they had not assessed the impact on the development on the openness of the site. There was no such assessment in his evidence. Neither is this an exercise Mr. Dix had performed. Having simply admitted to consider the impact of development on openness despite it being a refining part of Greenwich County. Showed a 3D model of development was superposed on Google Earth. That's there and Mr. Mr. Williams accepted that the development would have a significant impact on openness. Mr. Williams recognised that the appeal site had a different character than the wider river valley to the south, and considered it less important than the larger context of a multifaceted, multifunctional landscape where each land parcel contributes to the integrity of the whole. Custodians do not understand how this conclusion can reasonably be reached at the time. despite asking several times for his opinion were at odds with the principles established in the low garden. However, Mr. Williams confirmed that the heritage aspects of character are outside his expertise. On this basis, he had not considered the conservation and character appraisal. Zone 2, Charter Road Department related to tree belts on the upper edge of the tree enclosure. Provides an important sense of the historic buildings of Barnes. This is an important omission to any set out of how proposed affects the character and beauty of our landscapes, which requires an holistic approach. This might explain the limited scope, and hence it's stated disregard for the appeal side. Custodians say that the appeal proposal would have a substantial urbanising effect, largely erasing one whole facet of the landscape, whose overall value as a result of all its constituent and individually distinctive parts. This is a complete loss of the open character of the water meadow taken as a whole, and significantly detrimental to the character and natural beauty of the countryside. The harm to the defined characteristics of the green road is substantial, hence the proposal is contrary to strategic policy S11 and policy DM7. I know that the appellant accepts non-compliance with these policies, but their conclusion of minor harm is quite untenable on an unholistic view. The planning custodian's conclusions are set out in section 14 of Mr. Forde's brevity of bearing in mind the shortness of time. I will just paragraph 14.6, which relates to highway safety, potential for conflict in the highway and associated impacts on the free flow of traffic. I've set out above the manner in which the highway-related information was only available to the custodian as late as timetable, then only in a restricted form. We've also had regard to the evidence of Mark Geddes and the matters discussed at the timetable as such. We have dynamically adjusted our position within the highway process and consider that the highway matters should be given moderate weight in the planning plans rather than significant to our original position. Overall, as I said, the simple truth is that the environmental cost is just too high. From the 24 homes to affordable rent at a balance of 31 for share ownership. The tilted balance and other housing delivery points do not alter this conclusion. We could do so much more with the same capital investment in a less visual, less constrained location. And the extra people we could house as a result would be extremely grateful. This concludes our submission.